Hey everyone, this is John Schwabish from PolicyViz. Welcome to another Excel tutorial. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a tile grid map with slope charts. Strap in because this is going to be a long video, and I'll try to add some little notes throughout the video and in the show notes so that you can just fast forward to the part that you want. What I'm going to create here is this tile grid map. This is from Philip Bump at the Washington Post. It shows the number of cases and deaths from COVID-19 in every state in the country from 3 dates, okay? So notice the little integrated legend right into Alaska, which I really like here. We've got March 12th, 2020 to January 20th, 2020 on the left side. And then January 20th, 2021 to November 30, 2021 on the right side. So we've got these lines, 2 lines for these 3 different dates in this map. And so again, this is going to be a long tutorial. This is where we're going to end up. I've created 2 versions of the map. The one on the left just has all the slope charts or solid lines, and the one on the right really mimics Bump's chart, where the patterns that are going down, the decline in cases and deaths, are in the dashed lines. So this is where we're going to end up, but there's a lot to do here. So I'm going to split this into 3 parts. Preparing the raw data, then we'll get into calculations for the maps, and then we'll actually create the maps. And I'll put some notes in the video so you can just fast forward if you want, so you don't actually have to sit through it. If you know all about VLOOKUPs, you can do that. So I'm going to give you a quick peek at setting up the maps. You can see here, this is what we're going to use to set up the maps. Here's the data we're going to use for the maps. That's the one with just all the solid lines. Slightly more complicated for the one with the solid lines and the dashed lines, but let's get to the raw data. Okay, so this is the raw data tab that I'm going to use. I'm going to pull data from 2 sources. Centers on Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, is going to give me the data on COVID, and then the Census Bureau is going to give me the data on the population. So I have data from the CDC right here in columns B to G. So I've got the date starting in March 2020 all the way to the end of the year for each state. I've got its FIPS codes, number of cases on each date, number of deaths in each date, and then the year. Now the population comes from the Census Bureau. Now I pulled in the census data over here in a separate tab. Didn't have to do that, could have just copied and pasted, but it's fine, doesn't matter. You can see I've got the region, division, state, state name, the population in 2020, the population 18 plus, and then that percentage. I really just need the data in column F. So how do I get that over into my raw data tab? Simple VLOOKUP command. I've done a bunch of videos using VLOOKUP, so go back and check those out. What I'm going to do here is look up the state name in the Census Bureau where I have the tab, in that tab where I have all the data, looking in the entire table. Column 2, 0 gives me that exact match. I'm looking for Alabama. Again, this is all 2020 data, so it doesn't really matter. And I've got the population in here, all set. Okay, now I need to get the data into per capita numbers. So the cases data are in per 1,000, so I'm just going to do some simple division here. Same thing with deaths per 100,000, just do some simple division here, and I'm all set. So here's the raw data. Now what I need to do is pull out the data from the full data set, right? If I go down to this full data set, you'll see I start all the way here, and it goes all the way down here. There's about 35,000 rows because it's state by day, so I go all the way down there, so there's a lot. But all I need are these 3 dates, right? I just need March, January, and November for cases and deaths. So how do I do that without copying and pasting? Just make it simple for myself, because, you know, 1, I want to make sure if I'm copying and pasting, I'm going to make some errors. So I want to avoid that. And 2, if I say, well, maybe I don't want March of 2020, I want November of 2020. Well, I can do that. If I just change this number here, you can see that the numbers just changed. So I can do that. So how did I do that? Well, let me show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to use another VLOOKUP. This VLOOKUP is going to start here. This is the thing I'm looking up. Now, you're looking at this, you're like, whoa, what is that thing? Well, what it's going to do is it's going to join the date and the state name. So I'm going to copy this right here, and I'm just going to put it right here in this cell so you can see it. All this does is convert the date to a number, the way Excel will just convert it to a number, adds a little space in between, and then the state name. So that's what I'm going to search on in my raw data table. And so I've set up over here in column A what I just call matching, and that's going to have that same join. So it's the date and a space and the state name. And I just copy and paste that all the way down. So you can see I've got these dates represented by numbers and then the state name. So that when I come over here to my VLOOKUP, Excel looks at the date and Alabama, looks in this table for column 9. And notice that I've put in some dollar signs, some absolute reference signs, so that I can write this formula once and then copy to the right and copy down without having to change anything. And notice when I use my absolute references that I can lock a number and or a row. So for the date, I don't want to lock the column, right? Because the dates are going to change across the columns. So I don't want to lock the column letter. I just want to lock the row. So I always want to look in row 2. So by locking the 2, putting that dollar sign in front, that row is never going to change. And similarly, if I lock the M in M3, it doesn't matter when I pull this across, when I pull the formula across, because it's always going to look in column M, but it'll let the row reference move. And then, of course, the data table itself is all locked, doesn't change. So take a look here. So I've got N2 and M3. When I move over here, I've got O2 and M3. And when I go down to Alaska in column P, I'm still referencing row 2, now column P. And now I'm referencing row 4 here for Alaska, but still column M. So as you can see, I now have the 3 dates for cases, the 3 dates for deaths, and then I can calculate the changes. Just a simple subtraction for each of these because that's all I really need for this data. So I've got all of my data set up here. That's setting up the raw data. So as you can see here, what I'm doing is pulling multiple data sets together, creating the raw data, doing some calculations over here, and then I'm going to pull it into the other tabs where I'm going to do my calculations. And that's going to lead us to the second part of this tutorial, doing the calculations for the maps. All right, so let's do the calculations for the maps. So quick sneak peek, the way we're going to create this tile grid map with slope charts is to use a series of line charts. That's really all this is going to be. So what I need to do is get the data aligned in this particular way. So notice here in columns A to H, I've got state abbreviations laid out, sort of think about it sort of like if you kind of like turn your head to the left and then in your mind flip this around. So you've got Alaska, Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii, right? They're on the west coast. So you can see this is the shape of the United States just sort of flipped upside down. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the cases data and the deaths data into these columns over here, I to X, to create the actual visualization. But let's see how I bring the data over. So again, I've got the state name, state abbreviation, a simple VLOOKUP here. I'm just going to look up the state name over in my raw data tab, drag it down, and I've got the data all over there. Now I'm going to need a few other things to make these maps work. So let me define what this row variable is. If I go back to the original map, what I see here is just a series of line charts. And so I'm going to call this row here at the bottom the first row. This will be row 0, okay? So, or row 1. Let's see what I called it. I called it row 1. So row 1 is Hawaii, Texas, and Florida. Row 2, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia. Row 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Row 8 is going to be Alaska and Maine, okay? So that's how I'm going to set up these line charts. I'm just going to think of them or set this up as rows. So what I've done here in these rows, in this column here, is just really hard-coded where these states are, right? So Alaska is in row 8 at the very top, okay? Alabama is in that second row, so that's going to be row 2. Florida, as I showed you, is in row 1, so that's where that's set up. We'll come back to that. Then we're going to need some labels to add the state abbreviations. So I'm going to use that. To do that, I'm going to do the scatter plot. And so I need to set up basically the column where each state sets up. And so again, Alaska, you think of it here, think about these in columns. Alaska, Washington, Oregon, California, and Hawaii are going to be in row 1. Idaho, row 2. Montana, column 2. Montana, column 3. North Dakota, column 4, et cetera, et cetera. So if we go back, again, I just sort of hard-coded these. Probably could do it with some formula, but really unnecessary, I think. Alaska, column 1. California, column 1. Hawaii column 1, and there's Idaho in column 4. For the y variable, and we're going to come back to this in a little bit, I do a little bit of math here, very simple math, where I make my life a little bit easier by using that row variable, multiplying it by this scalar over here, which I'll talk about in just a second, and then subtracting off a fixed value here. You'll notice in this spreadsheet that I've got 3 numbers that are red and bold. That is a signal to me. That's my approach to let me know that I have a scalar. These are not data points. These are scalars or something that's being used to help me create the visualization. So that's what you'll see in the way I work. Doesn't work for everybody, but works for me. Okay, so I've got the raw data here. I've got the state set up here. Let's also set up let's lay out the data in the maps. So what I'm going to do here, again, I need these rows. So the data are all, more or less similar, right? Like if you look at the data here in cases 1, right, it's not like Texas, if we go down to Texas, which is at the bottom of the map, versus Alaska, right, 74 versus 71. It's not like the data are all that different, right? So what I need to do to place it in the map is add some value, some scalar to shift it up within the rows, right? Because this value for Texas is going to be 70, and so is this value for Alaska. So how do I get it all the way up here? Well, I'm just going to add this fixed number, 200, and that's going to be able to pop it up. So as you can see here, I start at 0. So the value here for for Hawaii is going to be 17 and 43. But then for the second row, I'm adding 200 to those values, and you'll see here that I've locked the reference to 200, so that if I don't like the way that looks at 200, I can change it to 400, and these all update. So this entire row here is all referencing this 400, and I'll put that back to 200. Okay, so now let's see how we get the data into this sort of map layout. Well, it's another VLOOKUP. So I'm going to look up the value for Alaska in my raw data. So look up AK in this table, column 2. So that's cases, column 2. And then I add this fixed value here. And if I go down 1, you can see that I'm looking in column 3, same search, adding that I2. And you can see that I have these locked so that I really just had to set up this first one for Alaska, and then I just copied and pasted that in all of the positions for all the states, and then I'm done. Okay, so that's setting up the data. There's one more thing I need to set up with this vertical line here. We'll come back to that in just a little bit. You can see that I set this up with the value of 1600, and now I can actually make the maps. So we now move on to part 3, creating the maps. All right, how do we create the maps? This is just going to be a series of line charts to get the actual core map, and then I'm going to use a scatter plot to throw on the labels. So I'm going to select all of my data here. You'll see what this vertical series is in a second. I'm going to go to insert my chart. I'm going to insert a line with markers, and I'll make this really big so you can see it. And you can see that I essentially have the map here, right? The map is pretty much set. I'll delete this legend. I don't need that. See, this map is pretty much set. So let's go back to the original WAPO map. So obviously I really like this map. I thought it was very smart. Not a fan of how the lines at the bottom of the states are slightly darker than the lines at the top, and then there's this sort of sandwich piece here. There's 2 lines at the bottom of these states. I can see why they did it. I don't think it's really necessary, so I'm not going to bother with that for this particular tutorial, this example. Okay, so as you can see, let me just add some labels here so you can see more clearly whoops, don't want that. I'm going to add data labels here so you can see these. I'm just going to put these on top, and I'll make them a little bigger so you can see them when you're watching this video. So let's just take a look so you can see what I've got. I've got, for the first set of states here, I've got, this is for the deaths that were grabbed. So 1052 versus 1069. Now the data value number of deaths at that time was 52 and 69, right? But I've added 1,000 to put it in this row, right? This is the first row, second row, third row. So 1052, 1069. And notice now what happens when I add this little row here, Excel skips that value. So if I add 1,000 here, you can see that I get a line. It just dips down. But if I leave that out, Excel ignores it. And so I don't actually have to have that point there. So I'm going to leave that out. And that's how I get this line charts all set up. So I'm going to delete that. All right. So let's create the break between the states. So there is a little bit you can see in these lines, these gray lines, there's a little bit of a break. So I'm going to add the break here. This is that vertical series. So by adding a line chart with markers, I can see these points, and you can see where I put the 1600 right in between, right in those gaps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an error bar here, and I'll just start with more error bar options. I'm going to format these to go down, no cap. I'll make it a percentage, 100%. So I'm just going to have these lines go all the way down, and then I'm just going to change the color. Let's just make these white. And I'll just bump this up to like a 20. Let's see what that gives me. I could probably go even higher, maybe 30. So that's pretty good right there. That gives me a nice big break between the states. And again, all I've done is just add a little error bar there. I can grab those markers, I can hide them, and they're gone. And then of course, what I need to do, remember to do, is to change my axis options. Excel does not let me plot the data to the top of the chart, so I'm going to put that up to 1600. So you can see I've got my chart. It's coming together here. I actually don't need my x-axis. I'll get rid of that. I don't even need these, but I'll leave these for just a moment. All right, so I'm getting there. All right, so now what about the state abbreviations? Let's go back to the original. Notice the state abbreviations. It's just the two letter postal address in the top left of the square. So we can do that with a scatter plot. Could probably do this with another set of lines, but I find in this case, it's just easier to do it with a scatter plot. So I'm going to right click, go to select data. I'm going to add a new series called labels. I'm going to fill in my Y series first. I'll come back to that Y series again, show you how it's calculated one more time. Hit OK. And now I'm going to get this crazy looking line because Excel thinks I'm adding a line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to a scatter plot. If you're on a Mac, the way I am right now, you just select the series, go to XY scatter, and plus scatter. If you're on a PC, you just go to combo chart. In the drop down next to this series, you just change it to a scatter plot. Same thing. Nothing that just the line has disappeared because Excel doesn't know what to do with the X position. So we're going to go back to select data, scroll down to labels, and change this to the X position. Select that and hit OK. And now you can see my dots are in the right position. What are those positions? Let's just take a quick look here. So why is this dot? This is for Wisconsin. I'm going to add a data label so you can see this. So I want you to be able to see both the X and the Y value here. And you can see that it's not quite cooperating with the X value. I don't know why Excel does this sometimes, but let's just take a look at Wisconsin. So the value is 1370. And the X position, so that's the value down here at the very bottom of my spreadsheet. You can see it's 16 and 1370. So 1370, what's that? So 1370, whoops, let's get back over there instead of clicking all over the place. What's 1370? 1370 is the row times that scalar. So I want to get it up into this row. So it's row number, row 7, times 200, that gets me up here. And then I subtracted off this number 30. Why 30? I thought that 30 that's just kind of like the right spacing there. Okay, so that gets the vertical dimensions within the row. What about the X dimension? So the X dimension is 16. So again, it's really just a column if you think about it as a column. So this is the first position, right? This is not a date. This is, from Excel's perspective, this is a position. So this is position 1. Position 2, there's a missing position 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So the X dimension here in this column along the left part of the slope chart is position 16. Okay, so now let's change this label. Instead of the X value or Y value, let's take the value from the cells. Lots of videos on this channel about this. I'm going to select these values all the way down this column. Hit OK. You see they're set up there. I'm going to set them up right on top of those circles. I think that looks good. I'm going to go and select the dot through my Format tab. I'll grab the label series and I'll set the marker to none. And now those are gone. Maybe make these a little bigger. Seem a little small right now. Make these a little bigger. There we go. And now I've got my label set up. And you can see that this graph is essentially done. And the last piece is to change the colors. And again, because we have 16 different lines, Excel has shaded them all differently. So we actually have to go in and do some pretty, I would say, tedious changing. So we want to have the blue line on the bottom and the orange line on the top. So I'm not going to do all of these, but just to show you, I go into here, I'm going to change this to blue. And for each of these, I have to, maybe I won't do the marker, but I'll change that to blue as well. And if I just do these in order, Excel will generally, not always, but generally hold that blue color for me. So you can see it's holding the blue color for me as I click. So I don't need to reselect the color each time, but I do need to remember to change each of the pieces. So there's 3 pieces. There's the border and the fill for the dots, right? So that's this part. And then there's the color of the line. And so you see I'm going up there, and I'll just show you now if I wanted to do the orange lines here for the top row, I have to do that one time, and then it should hold. Now, of course, I could write a little macro here to make this a little bit easier for myself, but probably, not totally necessary. I mean, whoops, so I did that backwards, but you get the idea. So I'm going to change that. So I tend not to, I don't imagine having to do this a lot. If I was going to do this approach a lot, I'd probably, write a little macro. But the way I've built this is I could really just read in new data, and this would all be set up, and I wouldn't really have to, redo this because it's just going to update with the new data. So that's how I create this map on the left. All the lines are solid. What about the one on the right? Slightly different. 2 series here. I'm going to have one series for the cases that are going up and another one for the cases that are going down. And notice here, what's going to happen is I have a really long VLOOKUP here. This is a really long VLOOKUP. I'm going to pull this one out and put it down here and then make this text really big so you can see it. What this is going to do is do a comparison. So it's going to compare the 2 values. And if the 2 values are greater than or less than each other, then I'm going to give it that value. If not, it's going to be NA, because what Excel is going to do with an NA is just ignore it. So I'm not going to remake this chart, but I will just grab all of these series. You see, it's just a little more complicated, but I could go here, create that chart. Here I'm going to have to switch the row and column, delete that legend, unnecessary, make this bigger. Oh, should have made that a line chart with markers. There we go, because I want those dots. And you can see here, it still works. This still sets up correctly. Let's take a look at one of the rows right here. So this will be my row 6 right here. If I go in, you can see here that these are increasing. So I'm going to select these. Yes, that's fine. Excel, I'll make these blue. And let's just make these blue here. So you can see that I've got those. Now, what about the ones that are declining? Do I have any that are declining? I do. I have these right here. And so I can do the same thing, a solid fill, no line. When I go to the line, I can change that and add a dash to it. And so you can see here, by separating these out, so if you can see here in row 6 and row 6, they exchange. So the Excel ignores the NAs, and it just plots the slope charts that are going down versus the ones that are going up. So that's how you create this slope chart, tile grid map. It is just a chart, just an Excel chart of lines. That's all it is a line chart. And when you think about creating maps like this or visualizations like this in Excel, just think about what Excel can and cannot do. It's good at making line charts. It's good at making scatter plots. It's good at making bar charts, right? And so if I think about how can I set this up to create this map, well, I know that Excel is going to ignore spaces and ignore NAs when it plots a line chart. And so I can just use that to my advantage and just leave some space out here to create this chart. So this is just another way that you can extend how you use Excel. I hope this was useful. I hope you'll be able to use it in your own work. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more Excel tutorials, chart tutorials, data visualization critiques, and more. This is John Schwabish from policyviz.com. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to this channel.